I did not love Deltarune Chapter 5. Yes, everyone, I know that's shocking to hear, but listen, let me sayeth. Okay, maybe that came off a little bit heavy-handed. Let me rephrase. I did not love Deltarune Chapter 5, but that does not mean that I didn't enjoy it, or that I think it's inherently bad. The chapter actually has a lot to like about it, and there was quite a lot that I did enjoy. But I feel that the chapter missed the mark in many ways. It's unfortunate for me to feel the need to make this video because I never expected that I would feel this way toward the Toby Fox release. I love Deltarune with all my heart, and this video comes not from a place of hate, but from a place of love. I know that Toby Fox is capable of things which are far better than this chapter, which is why I'm so disappointed by it, and why I felt the need to begin writing this script to begin with. But before we actually get into the video, I think I should introduce what I'm actually talking about for the two people in the room who don't know what Deltarune is. Deltarune is the sister story to this little underground indie game from 2015. Look, not many people have heard of it, so I do feel a little bit more justified in adding this part to the script. The other game in question is Undertale. Both games were created by Toby Fox, inventor of music, as well as the critically acclaimed sequel, Music 2, alongside being the one living person who can say that Sans the Skeleton is their original character. This game is sectioned into 7 different chapters, however only 5 have come out so far. And of those 5, I love the first 4 with all of my heart. Deltarune Chapter 1 is likely one of the prettiest experiences I've had with a game before. The aesthetics of everything, from the Field of Hopes and Dreams to the Scarlet Forest and the Card Castle, are absolutely dreamlike. I genuinely don't think I've ever had a desire to enter a video game world harder than I did when I first played Deltarune. Seriously, I can't gush enough over how much I love the way that Chapter 1 looks. Chapter 2 is similarly a very visually pleasing experience, but I would also just say that it's one of the best written chapters so far. It's hilarious, it's deep, it's awesome, and it's so iconic. The way I see it, Chapter 1 was the warm-up, but Chapter 2 is when Deltarune really became what it is today. And also, Chapter 2 introduced Spamton, and he's by far my favourite character in the game, even if I do think that he deserves nothing in life and should be filled with milk and thrown at a wall. Chapter 3 has Tenna, who is my second favourite character, and who I find to be the most relatable, and probably the second funniest after Queen too. I genuinely love the TV world. I keep harping on the visuals of these games, but they are so genuinely amazing throughout every single chapter. And this chapter is pretty special to me because it's all about TV and acting, and I want to be an actor as a career path, so automatically I'm going to love this chapter. I love the sword route, and by God, the Roaring Knights reveal has to be one of the most chilling, welcome surprises in any game that I've ever played. When the first time that I saw that, the Roaring Knight appeared, and the battle just begun, I genuinely think I nearly ran away screaming. And Chapter 4 is genuinely beautiful. It is so pretty. The Titan is one of the most hype moments in the entire game so far, although I'm not so sure it beats out the Knight. But regardless, Guardian is an amazing track, and Gerson as a secret boss is one of my all-time favourites. I love these chapters with all of my heart, and I could seriously spend way more time than is healthy glazing the hell out of them. Everything from every singular one of these chapters is absolutely amazing, and I love them each for their own strengths. I seriously don't think I have a single issue with any of these chapters, either. I would say, for what each is trying to achieve, the first 4 chapters of Deltarune are perfect. Then comes Chapter 5. Now, notice all of that talk about love beforehand. I love the aesthetics of Chapter 1, I love the humor of Chapter 2, I love how relatable parts of Chapter 3 get, and I love how genuinely aura most of Chapter 4 is, but the thing is that I can't exactly say I love anything about Chapter 5. Like, sure, I do like the visuals. I think on a technical level they are a major step up from previous chapters, and there are some really stunning parts of the chapter, but they don't really strike the right vibe for me. I like the humor. There were parts which genuinely had me cackling like a witch for 5 minutes at a time. But the humor was patchy. Unlike Chapter 2, where I was at the very least chuckling at something every few minutes, or where a character's presence alone put a smile on my face like how Queen did, Chapter 5 felt a little bit off. The humor was there, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the jokes were misses. I can only really list 2 parts of the chapter that genuinely made me laugh, being the aforementioned dump her ass tenor line, and when you turn off Ralsei's voice. Aside from that, a lot of jokes just didn't really hit for me. I like some of the OST for Chapter 5. Flower Man is an objectively fire song, and the lyrics are really cool, but it's no Chaos King, or Big Shot, or even Burning Eyes. Part of it is simply because I just never really got all that attached to Flowery, nor any of the other flowers, and so the song doesn't really hold much weight for me. Like, it's a good song, but I don't really care all too much about the one whom it belongs to, unlike King, Queen, Tenor, Spampton, basically everyone else in the game. But I mean, these are all subjective things, right? Look, maybe to other people, the visuals were beautiful in every way. Maybe they struck right down a person's interest and deeply gripped them, like how I really just want to get lost in the Scarlet Forest. Maybe people really, really like Flowery, and I'm just weird for not getting into his character enough to really care for Flower Man beyond it being a objectively good song. Hell, maybe people even found the chapter absolutely hilarious through and through. What you might find funny might not be the same as what I find funny, and that's totally fine. However, there are some objective issues with the chapter. Ones that I want to really dig deep into here. Again, not because I hate Deltarune, but because I love it, and because I expected so much more from this chapter. I want to see the last 2 chapters go out with a bang, hitting the same highs and maybe even exceeding what the first 4 chapters could achieve. But if the trend set by Chapter 5 continues, unfortunately, I don't see myself loving the next 2 chapters all that much either, and that would really suck. I want to love Deltarune, because it deserves the love. But Chapter 5 is flawed. Deeply flawed. Before I really get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly I think the big issue is with this chapter, I do want to take an entire section of the video to explain what I did enjoy about the chapter, because there is a really large amount, especially considering how I was just talking about the chapter a few seconds ago. I want to loop back around to those visuals that I briefly mentioned earlier. Look, the Dark World itself wasn't necessarily hitting all too hard for me, but the Light World, on the other hand? Oh my god. Look, since day one, Hometown has always been one of my favorite environments in any video game ever. It's so cozy and pretty, and I just love the aesthetic that it gets. And seeing it all ready for the festival is genuinely so cool. I wish that something like this would happen to my town, where the entire place essentially gets converted into one big amusement park. Of course, it's unrealistic, but it just looks like everyone is enjoying themselves so much. It's a kind of warm atmosphere that I really resonate with. And just on a technical level, the visuals are so great. I mean, the sunset and the shading near the lake towards the end of this section is genuinely beautiful. I loved all of the adorable Susie L content that was given throughout the beginning of the chapter, even if their date was being incredibly third and fourth wheeled by Chris and the Soul. And speaking of fourth, Ford Sanctuary. This made me laugh way too hard the first time that I read it out and realized that it said Ford Sanctuary and not fourth. Like the car. Castletown was an amazing experience, as always. It'll always just be one of the best parts of the chapter to be able to sit down with Darkness from old chapters and talk with them again. I never in a million years thought that King and Tenna would meet, but Tenna being King's new court jester after Jevil is somehow incredibly fitting, and genuinely wholesome when Tenna does end up making both King and Lanza laugh. This is great. Dressing up Susie to get her ready for her date with Noelle at the festival was really, really awesome as well, and I loved the callback to the Thrash Machine, especially with the fact that the dock options were still—
I don't really give a fuck what you think about it, Susan, because I am the soul, I am the angel, and it is my fucking choice. You will, and I mean will, wear the duck costume to your date with Noelle at the festival, and you're going to fucking like it.
I just think in general that the festival is probably my favorite part of the chapter in its entirety. Everything, from the jokes, to the visuals, to the story, and to the reindeer/dinosaur Yuri, it was so good. And it really put me in a good mood and got my hopes up for the rest of the chapter. Toriel curled up on the couch like a cat was adorable, we got Desriel confirmation, we got Sans from Deltarune confirmation, basically, and we got Chris Guna confirmation! Seriously, I loved the Light World section of this chapter. It just felt so good being back in hometown for the first time in almost a straight year, meeting everyone again for the festival. Going into the Dark World itself, Ralsei with his hat on returning was a huge surprise, but honestly, one that I was really, really happy to see. I've personally always preferred hatted Ralsei more than unhatted Ralsei. That's not a word, I could have just said hatless. Although hatless isn't a word either. I just think that the design from Chapter 1 is just so much more adorable, and I really didn't think that it would ever happen again. Towards the beginning of the chapter, seeing Ralsei angry was really, really cute too, in a weird way. It's like seeing a puppy trying to act scary. The Garden of Hopes and Dreams was probably the best part of the Dark World to me. I loved how closely it mirrored Chapter 1, which, as previously mentioned, is my all-time favorite chapter based on the visuals alone. I was also really excited to see where the obvious callbacks to Chapter 1 would go later in the chapter. Additionally, the switch to the platformer-style gameplay was genuinely awesome, and they managed to make the platformer style of gameplay unique to Deltarune and really, really fun. I loved the parts where you run like super duper fast as well, they were just so satisfying to play. And yet I've gone all this time without mentioning the absolute best part of the chapter, Asgore. Look, it was so satisfying to finally watch the most divorced man in fiction finally get some character development after, what, like 8 years? Where he's just been sitting around wallowing in his own shame in Deltarune? Like, watching him as his mind grows darker and darker as he spends more time in the Dark World most likely as an upcoming payoff to his Shadow Crystal that we know he had during Chapter 4. I could definitely tell that it was the dark force of the Shadow Crystal slowly turning him insane and more accustomed to violence. And the part where his Undertale face from his fight reappeared in the dialogue box genuinely gave me the deepest chills that I've had this entire chapter. Psst. Wait, what? Asgore wasn't being influenced by his Shadow Crystal. Oh my god. We'll get back to that, in that case. Look, regardless of that fact, Asgore had unholy amounts of aura for most of the early bits of this chapter. The scene where he throws you out of the Dark World and his design is split between the light and dark especially was so sick, and I love the switch from the strangely generic Dark World design to the full suit of armor, which eerily resembles that which is seen in Undertale. I think my overall opinion on the matter is that when this chapter shines, it really shines. I do genuinely adore these parts of the chapter, especially Asgore. He was so cool in this chapter, and as I said earlier, it was great to finally see some real development and a villain arc when there's been, like, 8 years of potential building to this moment. But while all of these points are great, I think that there is a significant issue which casts a shadow over this entire chapter. And that issue just so happens to be the very last thing that I would ever expect a Deltarune chapter, or a Toby Fox, anything for that matter, to get wrong. And it was one of the things that disappointed me the most. I think that overall, this chapter has a writing issue. We're finally here, and I'm finally terrified. The part of the video which either everyone will agree with, or which will have me publicly executed for my sins against humanity. The part where I actually sit down and criticize Deltarune Chapter 5. And this isn't going to be some light critique either. I'm not just nitpicking at small little things or saying that a couple of dead pixels here and there ruined the visuals. A lot of the things that I'll talk about here unironically upset me a lot. I am passionate about this game, and I'm likely going to have a certain tone that feels exceedingly negative throughout most of this section. I'll try my best to filter myself, but certain things may come out wrong. I feel the need to reiterate one more time that I do not hate Deltarune, nor Toby Fox. This section is entirely coming from a place where I just want to see Deltarune do better than it did here, with no real malice intended towards it or the people involved. They are genuinely talented, but that's why I'm disappointed. With that out of the way, final prayers for my safety, let's go. Now, let's wrap things back around to Asgore. I think he's what I'd like to tackle first because he is by far the largest writing-related issue in the chapter. See, Asgore is set up for a villain arc in this chapter. While he starts the game same as always, being that cheerful, lovable dad who doesn't really know what he's doing but tries his best anyways, we actually see him split off from that path really drastically. And I loved where it was going. First we get to see Flowery buttering him up, giving him all the things that he could have ever wanted in the Dark World and treating him like a king. But as time goes on throughout the chapter, Asgore's tone shifts. He gets darker, more antagonistic, this is visualized with his design changing throughout the chapter, from essentially just being what he is in the light world with a crown, to the iconic armor, which is almost exactly what he wears in Undertale, minus a few parts here and there. I was so genuinely excited for where exactly his villain arc was going. He slowly grows impatient with Flowery and friends, and shifts his focus not on the wonderful shifts his focus not on the wonderful world around him, but proving something. Finally, we get to know why Asgore is the way he is, why his life is in such a sore spot right now. Asgore knew about the Dark Worlds long before the events of Deltarune began. This twist is genuinely peak! Upon this realization, I was practically bouncing in my chair with anticipation to see where this would go to. He grows more dark with his words. His casual conversations and friendly demeanor turn darker and darker with each passing second until eventually, Asgore declares that he will murder the person who created this dark world, and parade their body around hometown to show everyone that he was right. Excuse me. What?! But do not get my tone wrong for 1 second. That is an amazing what. Asgore becoming a villain to this caliber was not something that I expected. Even knowing that he was supposed to be a shadow boss, or a regular boss even, in this chapter. But regardless, this is incredible. He is drastically different from the remorseful man that he was in Undertale, and a far cry from the hopeless father that he is in every other Deltarune chapter. This, by all means, is a shot in a totally different direction, but I was ready to follow it to the end of the road. This is so cool! So, where does it go? What happens in the end of this chapter? I mean, it's building to something, right? Right? He ends up the same as he was before this chapter. Wait a second. How can that be? There was so much build-up, so much potential here. What happened? Well, after the final battle with Flowery, Asgore saves Chris from Flowery and friends. Why? Well, I mean, to be fair, he obviously would be concerned with their safety. They are his child, are they not? He would be concerned for their safety, even under the influence of the Shadow Crest. Oh. Right. No matter. Look, surely this still goes somewhere, right? Flowery knows that Chris made the Dark Fountain, right? Him and the Flower Friends only want to support what Asgore wants, and Asgore said that he wants to kill the person who created this Dark Fountain. Does Flowery expose Chris? How will Asgore react to this? How will he... I'm sorry. Flowery doesn't tell Asgore? Why? Why would he not tell Asgore this? At this point in the story, Flowery is still very much against Chris and the Fun Gang. At this point in the story, he thinks that Asgore is against whoever made the Dark Fountain. He knows that Chris made the Dark Fountain and he wants to make Asgore happy and serve his every desire. One of those desires is to kill the one who created the fountain. So why exactly does Flowery not think to tell Asgore that his child created it? Now, would it make Asgore unhappy? Yeah, 100%. But the flowers are also depicted to not really know what would exactly make Asgore happy. They fail to entertain him time after time leading up to the big final battle. It feels like this was leading up to something. Hell, you could incorporate this into the story as a last-ditch effort to keep Asgore in the Dark World. Have it so that Flowery is so desperate that he tries to turn Asgore against his own family, so he doesn't desire to leave and will instead stay in the Flower King Dark World. That sounds like a Flowery move to me. But no, it's never brought up again. Asgore never finds out who created the Dark Fountain. He never gets to confront Chris about their actions. This "I will kill the person who made the fountain" plotline is completely unresolved. He doesn't kill them. He doesn't ask about them. He doesn't even learn who they are. And this idea of killing them? It is never brought up again. This alone is a huge plot hole. Flowery really has nothing to lose here, and everything to gain from letting Asgore know that Chris created the fountain, causing distrust, potentially making it so that Asgore, who he wants to stay in the dark, trusts the flowers more than his own family. Why? Genuinely, why did he just never mention that Chris created the fountain? This is such an easy direction to take the story in order to naturally raise the stakes in a way which is in character and makes total sense for all involved. Plus, how exactly does the Asgore fight work without the— Wait a second. Wait one whole entire second. We never fight Asgore in this chapter. Not one time. He is not the main boss. He is not a surprise boss like the knight who takes you on after you defeat the main boss of the chapter. And he isn't the secret boss. I will get to you later! Okay, now I need to admit something. I was wrong about this chapter when I first wrote this script. I was deeply under the impression that Asgore was the Flower Man. I had to go back and rewrite this entire part of the script because this section was originally a massive crash out over the fact that something in the prophecy literally doesn't end up happening. What with Asgore's prophecy panel being called Boss 3 and him not being a boss, yada yada. But it turns out that the quote-unquote Flower Man never was Asgore. He was always going to be Flowery. Initially, my main evidence towards Asgore being the Flower Man came from the song Flower Man. Flowery's theme, I assumed, was sung by Flowery, which meant that the Flower Man cannot be him. I mean, it would be pretty weird to sing about yourself in third person in this way. Lines such as 10 feet 20 the Flower Man convinced me it was Asgore because he's a taller person than the rest of the cast, but then again, Flowery just so happens to be the same height as Asgore. The next line being, "is waiting for the touch of his hand," was initially something that I thought meant Asgore. Asgore was waiting for someone to touch his hand, i.e. hold it, which is a metaphor for love. He is waiting for his hand to be touched, held by Toriel, rekindling the lost love they once held. But this can also be read as Flowery waiting for the touch of Asgore's hand. Asgore is his literal caretaker and gardener, straightening petals out without a plan. Now, to be fair, this actually still doesn't make much sense to me under the assumption that the Flower Man is supposed to be Flowery. Straightening petals out clearly means gardening, and Asgore is gardening without a plan. He runs the Flower King to keep himself afloat off of jars of pickles, but doesn't really have a plan going forwards in his life. I guess the song has a double meaning, whatever. But in general, it kinda disproves that Asgore was ever meant to be the Flower Man. In fact, the name itself disproves it. While I was searching for these tracks of music to put in the video, I discovered that Asgore's theme is called Flower King, and Flowery's theme is called Flower Man. Asgore's title in this chapter is the Flower King, and Flowery's title in this chapter is the Flower Man. So I guess that the prophecy panel was intentionally misleading. One of Tricky Tony's many tricks. But I still don't really think this was a good choice. Look, it would be one thing if the only thing we had to go off for an Asgore fight was a prophecy panel, something which can easily be misinterpreted. And I mean, from day one, people were theorizing that it wouldn't be Asgore who was the boss, but instead a Flower Darkener, which is in fact correct. But why did they have to give Asgore a Shadow Crystal? That takes it way too far. And it sets up for the exact disappointment that I went through, the exact misunderstanding that I had with the chapter. They opened up a plotline which basically says, you are going to fight Asgore, and not only do you not fight Asgore, this plot ends up going to a random joke boss with no actual relation to Asgore. For all intents and purposes, they open this plotline just to trick the audience, and it goes absolutely nowhere. I've seen some people point towards Batat's line, just because it's cool doesn't mean it's going to happen, as a reason for this, but this is not just because it's cool. Far from it. There is real, concrete evidence towards this fight happening. Look, when you give the dude a Shadow Crystal, you're basically coming up to us in person and telling us Asgore will be a boss. People aren't wrong for assuming he would be one after seeing this, especially with how hard Chapter 5 actually plays into the Shadow Crystal thing, what with his entire villain arc and a declaration of war against the person who created this fountain. You! Unlike other bait and switches that have been done in Deltarune, and other Toby Fox things as well, this actually doesn't seem like it should have been a bait and switch. Look, let's look at some other examples of bait and switches. Chris being super duper evil after Chapter 1 and being ultra possessed by Kara and evil and going off and murdering everyone. Rah, I remember your genocides type beat. That sucks. And there's no reason to believe that that would ever happen. So this being a Kara bait, this being a genocide bait that did not end up happening, makes total sense because the claim that oh my god. No, you know what, we're going with this take. The claim that Chris would murder everyone in Hometown is completely unsubstantiated. Another example of a good bait and switch like this would be Tenna's character as a whole. People saw the creepy scene at the end of Chapter 2 and assumed immediately that Tenna would be this Gaster-level, super ominous, super serious threat, scary and stuff. But, again, the reason that this ended up being a switch, or a bait and switch, sorry, is because the actual claim that Tenna would be this way makes no sense. You saw one creepy visual and you immediately base your assumptions about this character entirely around that without any context. Obviously this was going to be switched out for something else. I could keep going on because this applies to pretty much every other switch in Deltarune. Typically the way it works is that there's only like one or two little bits of evidence towards something happening in the next chapter, and then when it doesn't happen, people look back and they're like, huh, why did we think that would happen? That really would have sucked if it did end up happening. Like Chris being evil and murdering everyone in Chapter 2. But the difference here is that the entirety of Chapter 5 supports the bait. The previous chapter is not the only thing. The prophecy panel is not the only thing. They gave him a Shadow Crystal. They gave him an arc which leads towards this fight. They gave him a declaration that the fight would happen. This is not a bait and switch like every other example of it in Deltarune. This is literally the game lying to you, setting up for a fight that was never going to happen. And, you know, typically with these bait and switches, there's something that builds off of the bait, even if it's not what we were expecting. If we look at Chapter 1 again, with Chris ripping out their soul, we had no idea what that meant in Chapter 1. We assumed, completely incorrectly by the way, that it was just Kara, or something, whatever the 2018 Undertale fanbase was smoking. But later down the line, now that small little bait has bloomed into the entire meta-narrative with the soul and Chris's struggle against the soul and the weird route and everything. This builds off of itself. This is a positive bait and switch because it ended up meaning something. The Asgore fight not happening doesn't mean anything. It was just there to get a kick out of it. It was literally just there to be there. We don't get some deep, insightful alternative to the Asgore fight. It just doesn't happen and the Shadow Crystal goes to someone else completely random who doesn't even have a link to Asgore, and that's it. This isn't good. You know, to further hammer home what I'm talking about, Flowery is a better example of a bait and switch like this. Sure, maybe I don't really like him that much as a character, but in retrospect, assuming that Flowey himself would appear in Chapter 5 was a bit misguided. The only real reason to believe that Flowey would make an appearance was A, the Golden Flower imagery, B, the Omega Flowey attack in the trailer, and C, the other flower imagery in the trailer and the newsletters. But none of these things explicitly point to Flowey himself. The Omega Flowey attack? That's not Flowey's. It's the Aqua Soul's attack. And yeah, it is Aqua's attack in Deltarune. The Golden Flowers? Well, they could literally be any Dark Knight in the world. It doesn't mean it's going to be Flowey. This makes total sense in retrospect. I mean, the other flower imagery from the newsletter, these aren't even golden flowers. There's no reason to believe that these flowers are in any way linked to Azrael, let alone Flowey in retrospect. This is a good bait and switch, whereas Asgore has so much to believe you're going to fight him, even in the chapter when it's meant to happen, and then it just doesn't happen. Not good! And I mean, not to mention, I don't want to sit here and tell Toby Fox how he can and can't write his story, because as a writer myself, that's incredibly shitty, but this is one of the rare times with a bait and switch where I unironically think that the bait is better than the switch. Look, Flowery has grown a lot on me as of late, and I think I'm starting to enjoy him as a character more than I did when I first played the chapter. But let's be so honest here, fighting Asgore is still just so much cooler and so much better than fighting Flowery. With an entire chapter's worth of build-up behind it too, including some plot lines that have been left mostly unresolved or completely shafted from the last chapter. Okay, look, maybe we don't even have to fight Asgore. Maybe that is still an unrealistic expectation, all things considered. Maybe Flowery's fight... Actually, no, not maybe. Flowery's fight definitely has a purpose in Deltarune. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that Flowery should not have been a boss, and I do enjoy the boss in a vacuum. The Orange Soul mode is incredibly, incredibly cool, especially seeing it for the first time after all these years. But they could both coexist. Just have Flowery mention that Chris made the fountain after his battle, and then have the Asgore fight. That doesn't seem too much of a stretch to me. Doesn't seem like too much of a stretch to me. Jesus Christ, I need to write my scripts better. TLDR, Asgore should have had a fight even if it wasn't technically ever supposed to happen. His arc really needed it to be fully complete, and without it, the Shadow Crystal plot goes nowhere and his entire arc suffers because of it. I really don't see much sense in him suddenly just changing up the second that they see Chris injured. I mean, no, I see sense in that, but I don't see sense in why Flowery wouldn't have just spoken up and caused it. That seems incredibly Flowery to me, and there's no real reason for it to have not happened. Again, maybe you don't even have to fight Asgore. Maybe Flowery mentioning the fact that Chris created this fountain is what pulls Asgore out of his delusions. He realizes, wait a minute, I can't kill Chris. That is absolutely ridiculous. And from that point onwards, he realizes Killing anyone is ridiculous. Why would I kill anyone? That's not going to fix anything. This would be a better ending to the arc, without having the fight if it really, really wasn't going to happen. I can see this happening as much as the fight. Hell, I might even see this happening more than the fight. Some acknowledgement of the fact that Chris created the fountain in relation to what Asgore said about who made this fountain would have been appreciated. But no, it's not there. Okay, now that I've spent like 12 minutes talking about one thing in relation to Asgore and this chapter, I think I am finally done talking about this. I don't think that there is anything else that I can say without repeating myself or not really adding anything to the conversation. So from this point onwards, I guess I'll just fire off a bunch of smaller issues that I had with the chapter, because there are numerous, unfortunately. Part 1. The Festival. The festival was hyped up as being this massive event in Deltarune. As early as the second chapter, a whole 3 chapters before it ended up happening, the festival was brought up and you're even asked questions about it in the game. It seems to be a huge question of who are you going to take that has a lot of implications for the characters and their relationships. It's reiterated numerous times throughout the entire rest of the chapter as well. Who are you going to take to the festival is a massive question. Chapter 3 continues with the festival, one of the first and most impactful character moments of the chapter being when Ralsei reveals he physically can't go to the festival. This is devastating for Susie, with this reveal being the catalyst for the Darkness Are Just Objects reveal. Chapter 4 even continues with the festival hype, with Susie being super excited to take Noelle and that being a massive plot point, big enough that Carol, who is basically the main antagonist of the Light World section, takes a massive issue with it and makes a big deal from it. You would assume that the festival was going to be this huge, game-changing plot point, right? Well, I mean, it looked nice. To be completely honest, the festival has nothing to do with the chapter itself in any way, shape, or form. Which is shocking, considering the fact that the name of this chapter is Festival Day. Yes, it happens. Yes, it's really, really cute. But plot-wise, regardless of what route you're on, you could probably remove the entire festival from the game and this chapter would suffer almost zero consequences. Everything can still happen almost exactly how it does in Chapter 5, but without the decorations. The festival was there for almost no reason except to make Hometown look prettier at the start of the chapter, and I guess block off the shelter from the player with some inconveniently placed boxes of decorations. You could argue it was there to serve as a vehicle for Susie L, but that could have been done in any other way. Any date scenario would still work for the pair. The festival is not special in any way, shape, or form. Hell, previous plot points in relation to the festival end up going nowhere too. If you agree to buy ice cream for Susie and say it was from Ralsei, then Susie has a total of 2 lines which are like, wait, Ralsei said that ice cream was from him? Sick, dude, appreciate it. And that's it. Now, obviously I wasn't expecting this dialogue choice to, like, change the course of the story and, like, if you say yes, it'll fucking stop the roaring or something, but does this still not feel, like, super lame as a payoff to something from 5 years and 3 chapters ago? I would at least think it would seemingly mean more to Susie, right? Like, maybe more of a reaction than just, oh, that's cool. But no, okay, whatever. Carol being immensely against Noelle going to the festival with Susie kinda goes nowhere too. Noelle sorta just ignores Carol for a while until Rudy falls over and she has to leave early. There's no expansion on why Carol doesn't want Susie taking Noelle to the festival. In fact, again, regardless of route, Carol, who is the main antagonist of the Light World last chapter, doesn't even physically appear in this one!
Oh my god, 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 oh my god.
Either route does not need the festival to work. Yeah, it adds on to the context and aesthetics, and maybe that's all it would have needed to be if the name of the chapter wasn't Festival Day. The chapter is named after an event which takes all of 20 minutes, both routes included, and doesn't actually have any bearing on the story of the Dark World itself. It's named Festival Day, but the festival means basically nothing to the chapter. Part 2. Ralsei, what the fuck are you doing? Ralsei in this chapter. Oh boy, Ralsei in this chapter. Doesn't feel like Ralsei to me. Look, I understand what Toby was going for here with Ralsei showing a more mean and aggressive side of himself. Given that this is supposedly going to be the last chapter, quote-unquote, before things get serious, it makes total sense that he's at the very least tense. And we've been seeing Ralsei form into more of his own person throughout each chapter. It's one of my favourite parts of the game so far, and one thing we haven't really seen yet is a concrete instance of Ralsei being mad. On paper, this is great. On paper, I love this. But the pacing is borderline non-existent. They laid it on way too hard, way too fast. To go from such emotional lows as I'm smiling Chris, and honestly the entirety of chapter 4, directly into Ralsei telling people to shut up, making fun of Orange, and genuinely coming off as a little bit of a narcissist at many points throughout the chapter, threatening to kill Flowery because he was slightly annoyed with the guy in less than a chapter, is completely ludicrous. This wasn't paced out correctly at all. It doesn't feel like Ralsei. Now, it would if it was more build-up towards it, but again, the chapter doesn't really give itself time to breathe with this arc. The idea itself is fine, great even, but the execution couldn't have been more botched in my opinion. This needed more time to grow, to develop, to blossom into something, but it doesn't have that. From the moment that Flowery appears, he's a D1 hater to everyone around him. And why is that exactly? Sure, Flowery is a jerk, but Ralsei has dealt with many jerks before. Flowery being an asshole doesn't seem like the type of thing that Ralsei, as recently as chapter 4, would get overtly angry about. Is Flowery condescending? Yeah. Annoying? Absolutely. But again, Ralsei has dealt with all of these things and more in previous chapters, but this in particular genuinely caused him to turn into evil, dark, fucked up Ralsei from Gaster's hideout, consumed by the power of the shadow missiles, and he remembers yesterday, he's Asriel and I get it in concept. He would be rattled after the last chapter, deeply shifted emotionally. He wouldn't be ready to go back to being his regular self. He wouldn't be emotionally prepared to deal with someone like Flowery again. On paper, it makes sense, and I even really enjoy the idea of what's being shown here. But it needed to be paced better. I would understand Ralsei getting mad at Flowery towards the end of the chapter when he mentions that the Fun Gang is supposedly selfish for prioritizing Castletown over the Flower King Dark Fountain. That's literally asking them to destroy their home and erase every adventure they've ever had thus far, and outright calling them selfish for not doing it. That is way too far, and Ralsei crashing out then is completely valid. Honestly, if I were him, I would have been angrier. But he's been crashing out since the first time that Flowery appeared. Do they have history? Is there a reason why Ralsei hates Flowery so much in particular? Genuinely, tell me in the comments. Benefit of the doubt, maybe I did miss something, but first playthrough, this seemed super out of nowhere to me. And I'm sorry, what was going on between Ralsei and Asgore? Ralsei hides his face whenever he's around Asgore because he looks like Asriel. This is the closest we've ever gotten to an explanation as to why Ralsei looks like a dreamer, but there's not an explanation. There's no big reveal at the end of the chapter where Asgore sees Ralsei with his hat off or anything, or Ralsei explains why he was hiding in the first place. It literally just seems that Ralsei hides from Asgore because it would be awkward for Asgore to see someone who looks so similar to his son. I can't find any deeper meaning that we know of from the chapter. It literally just happens because Ralsei doesn't want things to get awkward. In fact, Asgore acknowledges that Ralsei looks like Asriel towards the end of the chapter, and the grand payoff for this excessive fear of being seen by Asgore and continuous hiding is Asgore saying, "Your friend looks like Asriel." But upon closer inspection, I realized he is not Asriel. Good fucking job! Astute observation, Asgore! What was the point of this plotline? Part 3. The Garden of Hypes and Potentials. The Garden of Hopes and Dreams set up for a direct parallel to Chapter 1. It is literally named after the Field of Hopes and Dreams, likely the most iconic location in Deltarune so far, and by far one of its most known tracks. How did Ralsei returns? There's a Malleus ripoff. There's Hop Chef instead of Top Chef. The Scissor Dancers from Chapter 1 are literally enemies within this chapter. There's knockoff Rudins in the form of the Floridans. There's so much here that directly parallels Chapter 1. Ralsei mentions it several times. There are things that are just directly what happened in their first adventure, but with a new coat of paint. So you would think that all of this means something, right? What is this going to lead to? What are they planning with all these parallels to Chapter 1? You leave the Garden of Hopes and Dreams and the entire chapter looks completely different, Ralsei removes his hat again, and the rest of the chapter has basically nothing to do with Chapter 1. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is, once again, an idea which is brought up and goes pretty much nowhere. Just like the festival, just like Asgore's Shadow Crystal, and just like his villain arc. Yeah, it happens, it's an event within the game, but it doesn't end up changing anything substantial about the story, nor does it end up being a major turning point for any characters involved. And I'm not trying to say that the rest of the chapter doesn't look nice, like, I do enjoy the way that it looks, but like, what happened to this? Where did it go? I lost track of it, where'd it go? It's hiding from me. Why exactly does the first part of the Flower King Dark World so closely resemble Chapter 1? I don't know. Why do the Floridans exist as an evil secret third Rudin variant? I don't know. Why is there a Malleus and Top Chef knockoff in the chapter? I don't know. Why are the Scissor Dancers back and are randomly enemies that you can battle? I don't know. Seriously, you leave the garden and it's not only as if it's a completely different chapter, but it's as if the game forgets it was even setting up for Chapter 1 parallels to begin with. Plus, this even leads back into the fucking Asgore fight. I swear to God, all roads lead to the damn Asgore fight. If we're paralleling Chapter 1, then the Flower King being the final boss of the chapter would parallel the Chaos King. Hell, it would even tie into the overall themes of this chapter with nostalgia and being stuck in the past. What better way to give a final send-off to living in the past than literally making us fight a character we fought before under very similar circumstances? No, she doesn't count! This makes it loop all back around into being one giant full circle. The first 5 chapters of Deltarune start and end fighting a king. The first 5 chapters of Deltarune start and end in pretty much the same place. This is such a cool way to go out for the final fun chapter. And it just makes me further wonder, why don't we fight him? Actually, you know what? I didn't even really finish my thoughts on Ralsei, so let's go back to him now. Part 3.5. Ralsei, what are you doing? Seriously? What exactly was the point of the hat? I've mentioned the hat a few times briefly throughout this video, but it's really confusing. Before Chapter 5, the hat was a visual representation of Ralsei's character. Chapter 1 takes place long before Ralsei ever really starts to develop his own character. At that point in time, all he really is a fluffy prince with no actual face or identity who acts as a guide to Chris. It's only after he removes the hat that he begins to grow into his own person with his own personal likes and dislikes. Chapter 1 Ralsei is obscured completely to the point of not even really being recognizable as a goat for a majority of the chapter, because at that point in time, there's really nothing to him as a character. He exists to serve the purpose of being a tutorial for Chris, and at this point in time, he's content with that. He has no face because he isn't a person yet, but instead, just a simple faceless Darkener who serves one purpose, to tell Chris and the player how the world works. From Chapter 2 onwards, however, he removes his hat and reveals his true design, revealing his identity. This is because Ralsei does begin to formulate his own opinions. No longer is he just a faceless tutorial Darkener, now he's his own person, with his own emotions, which is reflected by his face being revealed. We get to see who Ralsei really is, who he really wants to be, whereas Ralsei in Chapter 1 would repress those things about himself because he saw them as selfish, as if they went against his very reason of being alive as a Darkener. The hat returning in Chapter 5 not only tied into the Chapter 1 parallels, which literally went nowhere, but it could also be seen as a reason as to why Ralsei hates Flowery so much. Maybe he's not comfortable wearing the hat anymore. Perhaps he's grown too far as a person, and now this kinda reminds him of a point of his life that he isn't proud of, when he was such a doormat that he literally told Chris that it was okay to hit him if they felt like it. Now he's grown to be his own person and has likely realized that he doesn't like being hit. Unless he's not quite as innocent as he seems, I'm not judging, and the hat is sort of an uncomfortable experience for him now. I mean, Flowery literally forces him to wear it, and he implies that he's literally better with it on. That would obviously piss him off considering the fact that he's grown so much as a person. Flowery is basically pointing to him and saying, you were better when you weren't a person. You were better when you were nothing. Obviously that's going to offend him, right? But is this ever explained in the chapter? Nope. For all intents and purposes, this is a complete headcanon. There's no actual reason to believe that wearing the hat is some deeply uncomfortable experience for Ralsei, especially with my next point that I'm going to bring up. After we leave the Garden of Hopes and Dreams, Ralsei just takes the hat off again. Not only that, throughout the rest of the entire chapter, it haphazardly flips on and off every time Asgore appears because Ralsei needs to hide for Asgore for a reason that is literally unexplained unless, as I've said before, it really is just not wanting things to be awkward. This kinda kills any amount of character impact that the hat may have had. No longer is it some deep symbol about Ralsei's character, and it's now literally the exact same as Noelle's box that she used to hide whenever Queen came around in Chapter 2. There's nothing deeper here, the hat is just thrown on and off, as if it doesn't have some incredibly deep ties to Ralsei as a character. And that kinda kills my explanation for Flowery and Ralsei's rivalry, considering it's clearly not that much of a bad thing for Ralsei. A better way that this could have been written was to have it be a gradual decline. At the start of the chapter, Ralsei should have been trying to be his usual self, a people pleaser to everyone around him, including Flowery. He has dealt with unlikable people before, so he's gonna do what he always does here. But then, Flowery begins to cross the line a little bit. He goes from being generally obnoxious, like many of Ralsei's previous adversaries, into being more personal with him, shoving the hat, which he hates wearing now, back onto his head and implying that he's better with it on, acting immensely condescending to both him and the other members of the Fun Gang, implying things about both Ralsei and his friends which cut deep and really get under everyone's skin, and just generally taking things too far. Ralsei would try to shake it off at first, like he always does, continuing to keep up this act of being benign little person, friendly to everyone around him no matter what. But with the emotional instability that comes from what happened last chapter, his resolve weakens as the chapter goes on. He gets more and more tense, his fuse shortens, shorter and shorter and shorter. Perhaps he snaps at certain points and says things that catch everyone off guard before quickly trying to save face and move past whatever it is that he just blurted out. Throughout the chapter, Flowery is slowly weakening down Ralsei's shield throughout the chapter, testing just how many times he can tiptoe over the line before things explode. Essentially what I'm saying is that Flowery needed to rage bait the fuck out of Ralsei until he crashes out and loses his mind. And then, near the end of the chapter, when Flowery has the nerve to suggest that they are selfish or morally incorrect for keeping their fantasy, Castletown, around over the Flower King one, Ralsei just loses it. Then it would be justified for him to start screaming at— I said Ralsei in this first take, I meant to say Flowery, so screaming at Flowery to shut up. Outraged at the audacity of this idiot for daring to cross the line that you should never cross. That is his home. It's the Fun Gang's home. It represents everything they've ever gone through, and considering that in-universe all of these characters have developed this much over just 5 days, it probably feels incredibly fragile. He's unaware, of course, that Flowery has wanted this the entire chapter. He's been an obnoxious loser on purpose. He was acting this way because he wanted to annoy Ralsei, because he wanted to get under his skin, and he's finally broken him. Now, Ralsei has shown what he's really capable of, what he's been hiding this entire time, and the fun gang are questioning just how much they really know about him. But no, this just doesn't happen, in the slightest. From the moment that Ralsei lays eyes on Flowery, it's genuinely on sight, and he's rude to practically everyone in this chapter who isn't Chris and Susie. He tells people to shut up, he makes fun of Orange at numerous points in the chapter, he threatens to kill Flowery multiple times as if it were nothing. Again, I'm completely for Ralsei showing a darker side of his personality, but this execution was terrible. It came on far too hard, far too quick. Part 4. So, what was up with the flowers exactly? Why do the flowers resemble the Undertale souls? Why do they share the same attacks that their corresponding soul had during Undertale? Why do these explicitly get called their Omega attacks as a clear reference to the Omega Flowery fight? Hell, why do all of the flowers have the same weapons and armors that their corresponding Undertale souls had? Why does Flowery's song have Flowey's motif? What is the actual link between the Deltarune flowers and the Undertale souls beyond what is in front of you, which is they are colored the same? I really can't seem to find a reason except for that, the meta reference. Flowery's theme has Flowey's motif in it because Flowery exists as a bait and switch to the people who wanted Flowery and Deltarune. Sorry, Flowey and Deltarune. I'm gonna be doing that a lot this section, getting Flowey and Flowery mixed up. Yeah, he only has the motif because he's a bait and switch. He doesn't actually have anything to do with Asriel or Flowey. No, he's just got Flowey's motif because on a meta level, he is Deltarune's version of Flowey. But that isn't earned in any way. He's not actually similar to Flowey, his character isn't even remotely the same, his design looks nothing like Flowey. The only link is that both are a golden flower and their names are almost the same, but that alone does not make him Deltarune Flowey. These are surface level observations which don't actually have a story reason to link him to Flowey. The same can quite honestly be said for the other soul flowers. Why do they all have Omega Flowey attacks? Well, because they're supposed to be the souls from the Omega Flowey fight. It's not earned in any way, they are just the same colors and are held in glass cases by Asgore just like the souls, but there's no character links between the souls and the flowers, there's no lore links between the souls and the flowers, they just are the same because they are. It's not earned, just like how Flowery, it happened again. Just like how Flowery having Flowey's motif is unearned aside from the fact that their names are similar because Flowery only exists as a bait and switch to Flowey. Hell, I mean, you could have made it so that every flower had a name in Deltarune. Purple's name is Seth for whatever reason. What if the name of the character who the Purple Soul belonged to in Undertale was Seth? That is a deeper connection. Give them all names to link them harder to the Undertale counterparts. Hell, why not name Yellow Clover? That would have been an awesome thing to do, and I'm sure the Undertale Yellow team would be screaming when they played this and found out. Give them all names so that they are directly tied into being the Deltarune versions of Undertale's souls, outside of the shared colours and linked to Asgore, kind of. And I mean, I kind of understand why this happened too. It's because, initially, this is all that the flowers were. They were added to the back of the Flower King just to reference the Undertale souls and Flowey. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't really much thought into a reason as to why these flowers reference the Undertale souls, because there never was one to begin with. They were just a meta-reference. They were just, hey, these colored flowers which mean nothing to the characters, but you as the player know that these colored flowers line up with the Undertale souls. That's all they were to begin with. And that was okay to begin with. But now they've tried to turn these flowers into full characters without really going back and trying to explain a reason as to why these flowers so closely resemble the Undertale souls. There isn't a reason, because they were made just for the meta-reference, and then got turned into characters without reconsideration of the fact that they are just meta-references. They don't feel like Deltarune's versions of the Undertale souls, in the same way that Toriel in Deltarune feels like Deltarune's version of Toriel from Undertale. That's not how this feels. No, instead they feel like Deltarune characters who are references to the Undertale souls, with no actual reason to be references to the souls, and no connections to them beyond the initial surface level reference. And again, this would be fine if the characters themselves did not try to be so deeply tied in with the Undertale souls, but they literally share attacks. Why? These two sets of characters between the Undertale souls and the Deltarune flowers are almost entirely unrelated beyond the reference of their designs, kind of, and some basic traits which some of them don't even follow. Sure, green is kind, blue has a great deal of integrity by standing up for yellow and telling you to tell the truth. Yellow himself is literally a cowboy and is obsessed with justice. Seems that these characters all follow their corresponding Undertale soul meanings, which could have been a deeper connection, but then Aqua, the patient's soul, is randomly not following this trend. She is not patient, she's the exact opposite of patience. Her fight needs you to do a different thing each turn in order to keep raising her mercy, because if you do the same thing twice, she gets bored of it and doesn't take interest anymore. Why is she the only one who doesn't follow the trend? What is special about her that isn't special to all of the other flowers? In general, the flowers are so weirdly disconnected and inconsistent. Why is Seth the only flower with a real name? Why is Aqua the only one who doesn't follow her soul meaning? Why is Orange a weird rat thing when everyone else tries to look human to some extent? And would Orange not have just changed into a more human form when they realized they look nothing like a human? They can seemingly change their forms at will, so why not do it here? And why are some of the souls children, but a majority of them are seemingly adults? Again, you could have just made it so that all are children to further hammer home that they are Deltarune's versions of the Undertale souls, because presumably all of those souls were also children who fell into the underground like Frisk. It would be better if they were all young characters like Aqua, but for some reason, they're not. And even more so, it's clear that these flowers want to keep the Dark World open. The whole thing with Thank You for Watching My Dream is them explaining that this was a fantasy to them. They spend day after day after day as powerless flowers, aware of the world around them, but completely unable to change it. Now they actually have the chance to live out their fantasy that they could be something more substantial than a flower. That's why they all pretend to be human, because they want to be human. That's why Flowery can fly, can dish out 999 damage to the knight over and over and over again. That's why they can combine into Omega Flowery. It's because they want to do this in real life. It's because they can bend the Dark World to their will and basically treat it like a lucid dream. This is what Thank You for Watching My Dream means. But then would they not want to keep the Dark World going for as long as possible? Keep this dream going for as long as possible? In fact, no, they do want this dream to go on forever. Flowery literally tries to get the Fun Gang to leave at multiple times because not only does he think that it's just better for Asgore, but he also just wants the other flowers to be happy. He wants to be happy. He wants to be able to live this dream forever. So then, why doesn't he tell Asgore and cause the Asgore fight? I need to stop harping on this point. Part 5. Meet my secret cousin. Their name is Rory Knight. Where the fuck were you this whole time?! Oh my god, why is the Roaring Knight nothing more than a 2-minute cameo in this chapter? They were essentially the main enemy of chapter 4, appearing just after every other cutscene and summoning a damn titan, and now they're back to doing nothing? Oh, guys, they took Asgore this time. Guys, they took Asgore! Guys, they took Asgore!
Why do you keep
kidnapping people. Why did you take Asgore this time?
Was it to keep his code a secret? I mean, that would make logical sense. Asgore was the police chief, and we did find a part of that shelter code in Chapter 5. So they likely did take Asgore to keep the police badge code on the down low.
I am losing my mind. Slowly, I am losing my mind.
Why did you take Undyne too? Why is she being held in Wingast's evil secret shelter of death, doom, and despair? She didn't have a fucking code piece! Wait a minute. Capturing Asgore achieved literally nothing. Because by the point they arrived, we already had the fucking shelter code. Oh my god. Oh my god. Their name is Rory Knight. Their name is Rory Knight. In all of the Knight's attempts of covering up this code, they have achieved a total of 0 of them. Toriel, who presumably has a piece of the code in the form of the Deltarune symbol, is roaming free. Asgore, who presumably has the police code badge, was captured for nothing because they were genuinely 40 minutes late. Susie probably has that shit memorized like she's gonna recite pi. And while the guitar code is unknown, they haven't actually stopped it themselves, unless Carol Knight is true, but I really don't buy Carol Knight. Plus, I know damn well that code is 1225 anyways. Literally everything death-related is 1225. For all we know, the Knight did literally nothing to stop this code from getting out, unless it's like 1225 repeated 1225 times. I don't fucking know. The Knight basically just has a network of helpers to do all of their shit for them. For example, Chris opened literally 2 of the game's 5 Dark Worlds, maybe even 3 if you believe they opened the Card Kingdom Dark World. The Knight themselves has basically done nothing outside of Chapter 4, and like, kidnapped a few people for seemingly no reason! Well, Asgore has a reason, but it doesn't matter, because we already know the fucking code! They tried to kill Tenor, but they didn't even succeed at that if you recruit everyone in the fucking chapter! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Dump her ass! This is so convoluted and confusing. What the fuck is the Knight planning? No, because they tried to capture Toriel, and we know damn well that wasn't just to keep her quiet, because she only got into the Dark World because Chris opened up the Dark Fountain in their house, likely because they wanted the Knight to come over and kidnap Toriel, right? Right? So why would that be? Because she had the Deltarune code piece, right? Okay. So why'd they kidnap Undyne? Because she had the police badge, code piece, right? No. Because Asgore has the police badge code piece, unless his code piece was the Deltarune, but in that case, why did they try to take Toriel? Plus, this chapter just vague posts way too much. Look, I know that vague posting and opening up mysteries is quite honestly a part of Deltarune's identity at this point, but we are chapter 5 out of 7. There is 2 chapters left. There's not a lot of time left, considering the fact that every chapter is anywhere from 4 to, like, 6 or 7, shut the fuck up, hours long. You know, we don't have that much time. We have, like, a maximum of 12 actual in-game hours left, unless Chapter 7 is some, like, 18-hour-long mega chapter, but somehow I highly doubt that. The game is still concerned with keeping up the mysteries and these ominous and scary loose ends, but now is the time to answer them. We have well entered the 3rd act. We don't have the time to keep up this nonsense of, Chris, I'm sorry about that thing that happened on that day, which we as in you and me both remember, which caused that other thing to happen after that day. No. We can't keep doing this. We don't have time. It's time to actually explain things. There is an unbelievably long list of questions that still need to be answered, including, but definitely not limited to, what is Friend? What's going on with Gaster? December Holiday. What happened to December Holiday? Carol's link to the Knight's plot. What that plot actually is. Carol's link to the soul. Does she know about the soul? The vessel. How did the soul enter Chris's life? Was Chris possessed beforehand? Why is there a save file in the Dark World from Chris themselves, even if you just bought the game and have never played it before? How do other people tie into the Knight's plot, for example, people with codes? What is Ralsei? Who is Ralsei? Asriel. The Shelter. That Day, which is a new mystery that the chapter opened. We can't be going off and opening new mysteries this late into the game! And the list goes on. Look, I'm sorry, Toby needs to lock in fast for chapters 6 and 7 because these things need to be tied up. We really could have gotten explanations in this chapter, especially for things such as that day, Asriel, and what Ralsei actually is. These things could have been shown and explained, and again, we got so painfully close to some insight onto why Ralsei looks like a dreamer, but Asgore has a great deal of zero fucking things to say about that. These things are still being vague posted about, as if we've got the time to concern ourselves with Asgore saying a whole lot of nothing about that day. We don't. We don't have the time anymore. It's not only chapter 5, it's 5 out of 7. We don't have that much time left. We don't have the time to listen to the counter-argument. Just be patient. It'll be explained later. I was disappointed to see just how little is actually explained this chapter, because again, I've said it so many times already, but we don't have the time anymore! It doesn't give me very good feelings for the future of this game, because there is so much to wrap up in just 2 chapters' time, and again, unless we get some mega chapter, that's like anywhere from 8 to 12 hours left of the game itself. That's not good! Plus, we're gonna need to have all of this get explained while juggling all of this background information with the main story at hand. What is the Knight doing? When is the roaring going to start? How is the roaring going to start? How is that going to affect everything? There's such a bad juggling act that Toby has written himself into, and I'm really worried about it. The only real thing that this chapter answered was the how long did it take her to smile ARG, but that was going to be answered effectively regardless because the answer was likely planned long in advance, where I don't really have much faith that the explanation for a shocking amount of loose ends will be 100% perfect. Look, contrary to popular belief, Toby most likely does not have every singular little part of the script, down to the last letter, down to the last joke, for every Deltarune chapter, every scene, every little tiny thing memorized and written down in 58 places each. Yeah, he's insane with the planning that he put into Deltarune, and I totally appreciate that. Undertale was literally made as a test game for this game. The best-selling and best written of all time, I would say indie game, but I would also wager to say games ever. One of, like that Undertale was a test for this game. He's insane with this, yes. But he's not God. We have left way too much open-ended to solve absolutely everything in a satisfying way with such little time left. It gets to a certain point where you, as a human writer, just can't pull something off. Unless, again, chapters 6 and 7 both have, 3 chapters worth of content within them, but somehow, I doubt that. I want to have faith that it will work out, but after chapter 5 left me with almost an hour's worth of negative thoughts, I am not so certain. And that's a really, really sad feeling to have. But hey, can't change much about it now. Chapter 5's out. Haven't gotten any explanations to anything aside from supplementary content such as Destriel, which only really serves towards Death Knight evidence, as if that won't just be revealed at a later date anyways. This was not something that needed to be shown. Even if I really, really appreciate it, there was so much more that this could have gone to, so much more that could have been explained that just wasn't touched on in this chapter in favor for keeping the spooky mysteries all we can really do is hope that these things are tied up effectively. I don't doubt that there is likely more that I could harp on about with this chapter. There is so many little tiny issues that I have with it. So many tiny little plot contrivances and things that just didn't make any sense that I honestly could extend this video by another hour just to go in depth on everything that I had wrong with this chapter. But this video is already obnoxiously long, and 99% of it boils down to writing bad, and that's it, pretty much. So, I think that I have made my point clear. There's definitely more, but going any further would be pretty redundant. I've made my point so painfully clear. I hated the writing of Chapter 5. Well, no. No, I didn't hate it. But it's bad. It's really, really, really bad in a lot of aspects, and it really, really deeply saddens me to see, because, as I said towards the beginning of this video, out of literally every game that I could have had such a bad issue with the writing for, Deltarune, created by John Storytelling, inventor of storytelling, like, I expected so much more. And what we got just isn't it. And I'm really, really upset about that. But that's about all I've got to say. I've explained what I liked, I've explained what I really didn't like, and yeah, there's ups, there's downs, and there's not really much I can do about it. I'm just some idiot on YouTube who's probably going to be murdered on Twitter for this now. So, I think it's finally time, after this obnoxiously long project, probably my biggest project in my YouTube career, I think it's time that I finally give my final rating. Overall, I would probably give this chapter a 6.5 out of 10, which probably sounds ridiculous given how I was just talking about it, but it's still a Deltarune chapter, and I do love Deltarune. Nothing is going to change the fact that it's still something from one of my all-time favorite video games of all time. Even if this was genuinely, like, the worst written thing of all time. Okay, very, very quick interjection. My tone there was the worst thing ever. That was not how I was supposed to say it. Like, I mean this as in, even if it were the worst thing, like the worst written thing of all time. Not saying that it is, but theoretically, if it was the top worst written thing of all time, then that's what I mean. But, like, the way that I said that line in my initial take sounded like I was saying, yeah, even if this thing is, like, the worst thing ever, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. I don't think that it's the worst written thing of all time, I promise. I promise. The minimum that I could give a Deltarune chapter is a 5 out of 10. Because it's still a Deltarune chapter. Gameplay-wise, that gets a straight 10 out of 10. The whole platformer section was amazing. The Orange Soul mode was an absolute treat to see and to play, and it makes total sense too, that it's essentially a modified version of the Yellow Soul mode, given that these two colors are so close together. It makes me wonder that if we ever get an Aqua Soul mode, maybe it'll just be a modified version of the Blue Soul mode. That's something really interesting to think about, in my opinion. I really, really loved the gameplay of this chapter, and searching out the pink coins for the secret boss was probably the most fun and intuitive secret boss discovery methods, puzzles, whatever. It was probably the most fun that I've had searching for a secret boss, because unlike Jevil, and unlike Spamton, and unlike Gerson, it's not just a glorified fetch quest. there's genuinely, like, difficult challenges that you get rewarded for completing the challenges. Not only can you unlock the secret boss, but you can also unlock the flower weapons and armors, which are some of the most powerful in the game so far. This is really, really good. I loved this part of the chapter. The gameplay, 10 out of 10. Humor, I mean, I didn't really find most of it that funny. It's definitely not a chapter 3 or a chapter 2. So maybe like a 6 out of 10? I think 6 out of 10 is fair. Now, if we want to talk about the hype moments in Aura, if we don't factor in the fact that Asgore's villain arc was totally sabotaged by the horrendous writing choices that just completely threw away, like, any interest that I had in this arc, if we talk just solely about the hype moments in Aura that Asgore had in this chapter, 11 out of 10. Triple S tier. Triple S plus tier. Holy shit, Asgore was so awesome in this chapter, even if, in the end, he went nowhere. So, yeah, as I have been saying this entire video, ups and downs. I really, really loved parts of the chapter, but overall, not enough to really say that I loved the chapter itself. But hey, maybe that's okay. After all, it is pretty unrealistic to expect that Deltarune would be a truly perfect experience through and through, isn't it? Like, nothing is perfect. Even regardless of the fact that I would give absolutely every other chapter in the game a straight 10 out of 10, maybe that's not necessarily true. Maybe other people have different opinions, and maybe other people have different opinions about this chapter. Maybe they would give this a 10 out of 10 and everything else like a 0 out of 10. I don't know. My point being, Deltarune was never going to be perfect. And expecting that this kind of disappointment would never come in one way or another was equally unrealistic. I should not have had Deltarune on such a high pedestal. Everyone makes mistakes, and Toby Fox is only a human being. As I said earlier, he's not God. He's not the king of writing, even if he is one of the best writers of our time. He makes mistakes. Plot points can go nowhere. And that's okay. Part of art is the mistakes along the way. And I have faith that this game will end up back on its feet. With that all being said, finally, after working on this for, what, like 3 weeks in real life? I think it's finally time to pull the pin on this review. Thank you all for watching my honest criticism of Deltarune Chapter 5.
When the light is running low and the shadows start to grow and the places that you know seem like fantasy.
What the? Tenna Deltarune, what the f*** are you doing here? What? I've literally been swearing for like most of this video. Why does it matter now? A new story? What? What the hell does that mean? What new story? Tenna? Oh, really? And what would that be exactly? Oh my fucking god! Yep, there is a secret bonus chapter in this video. Why did I not mention it until now? Because it's my video and I can do what I want. Now, let's finally get down to what probably pissed me off more than anything in this chapter. The secret boss! Yay! I'm so excited! This was the first time that I ever dedicated myself to not looking up any guides or spoilers as to how you're supposed to reach the secret boss in a Deltarune chapter. I knew about Jevil before I first fought him. I knew about Spampton Neo long before I first fought him. The Knight is an exception, seeing as their boss doesn't require a guide to find, but I did look up a guide for the Sword Route. And Gerson also falls under this. I knew about him being the secret boss before I fought him. So this was the first time that I ever really dedicated myself to finding a secret boss authentically. No spoilers, and not even any spoiler-free guides as to how to actually find this boss. I worked out the puzzles, I figured out what they were, and I knew what I was meant to do. I was proud of myself for this. I was really proud of myself for unlocking the secret boss by myself. So who is it? Is it Asgore? Man, I genuinely pray it's Asgore. Is it gonna be Friend? How about, I don't know, a secret red flower, one which represents the red soul and was, I don't know, shunned for being too, like, evil and violent and shit or whatever. It's, oh my god, I was so excited. Who is it going to be? Who am I going up? Mad Mew Mew! I don't get it. I don't get it. Am I hallucinating? Is this a fucking joke? Out of everyone it could have been. Literally everyone that this boss could have been. Look, it could have been Asgore, it could have been Friend, it could have been a red flower. Hell, even if my hopes for Flowey were snuffed out the second that Flowery appeared, he still could have been the secret boss, theoretically. And out of all of these options, every single character who it could have been, potentially the best or most awesome shadow boss to date.
We get Mad Mew Mew from Undertale, from the Switch Undertale release. You get that fucking Mad Mew Mew, you fucking kidding me? You having a fucking laugh?
Her story sucks. Why does she have a shadow crystal? Well, she has Asgore's shadow crystal. How does she have that? Guess he just fucking dropped it somewhere, and Mad Mew Mew found it, picked it up for no reason, did nothing with it, and decided,
You flirted with me until I gave up fighting you, so like, take this cool rock and a kiss, moi.
and then left. This is where the Asgore Shadow Crystal plotline went. You don't fight him, his villain arc has literally nothing to do with his Shadow Crystal, he said all of that stuff about killing the person who made this dark world by himself on his own volition, and it's never explained how his mind jumped to these insane dark conclusions, how a, for all intents and purposes, regular person could just declare that he's going to murder someone and parade their body around town. No, it's never explained. We don't know why or how he thought it was okay to say these things. No, what actually happens is he just stops at the end of the chapter. He literally just stops. I guess that Mad Mew Mew just randomly got his Shadow Crystal, and this is a great explanation for both her having it and him not having it. How does Mew Mew even end up in the Dark World? She was an action figure in Asgore's pickup truck outside of the Dark World. You could make the argument that she was actually in the manga in the Light World after the fact, but no, she's not the manga. The ghost literally says that she possessed the doll. She makes a point that she possesses the doll who is outside of the Dark World. What the fuck? What does Mad Mew Mew even have to do with freedom? She has no ties to the fucking freedom theme which is shared between every other shadow boss, excluding the Knight, who is again a special case. Jevil believes that he is the only free person in the world. Spampton Neo is obsessed with obtaining freedom from his strings as being a puppet to the game and a non-playable character. Gerson Boom is free in the sense that he literally isn't bound by any writing on the wall. He is a hard prophecy denier and may have even influenced how the prophecy appears in Chapter 4, given that he wrote Lord of the Hammer, likely a book with a copy inside of the church at time of the Dark World opening. It's possible that Gerson wrote part of the prophecy he's supposedly bound by, which is a paradox, and ultimately makes more sense that Gerson himself is not bound by it. In fact, him not using his Shadow Crystal is integral to him, because it represents that he is free. And Mad Mew Mew is? She has nothing to do with freedom. She doesn't want to be free from her body, not at all. She doesn't have any meta-knowledge over the game like Spam to Neo, she has no ties to prophecy like Gerson, she has no massive backstory or deep character ties to freedom like Jevil. Why does she have the freedom motif? Because she's a secret boss, and all the secret bosses have to have the freedom motif. That's the reason. That's the reason. That's literally the reason. Even despite the fact that other shadow bosses like Gerson, who have less ties to freedom, are much, much quieter with their freedom motifs, and, you know, harder to notice the freedom motif in their song, or the Knight, who outright does not have the freedom motif in Black Knife, because they don't actually have anything to do with freedom despite being a Shadow Crystal boss. Not only does Mad Mew Mew have the motif, despite having nothing to do with freedom, but it's also noticeable as shit! Remixed? Yeah, which could be seen as something, but as it stands, this makes no sense. Why does she have the freedom motif if her character has no motifs to do with freedom? I'm losing my mind! Losing my fucking shit. The only kind of freedom that I can think of with Mad Mew Mew is personal freedom. I understand that Mad Mew Mew is, at least in Undertale, a trans-feminine character. The ghost which possessed the body was one who didn't really feel comfortable with their self and their identity initially, eventually finding what they saw as their true body, the Mew Mew animatronic in Undertale's case, and merging with it. Since then, they've never been happier. While that's amazing, and I genuinely love the trans representation here, it's important to represent this stuff in media, especially now, given the circumstance of some areas and their politics. Like, I have no issue with the trans representation at all. That's not my problem. My problem lies in the fact that this doesn't really seem like enough to give her the freedom motif. Like, not only is the identity of this character being transgender never touched on in Deltarune, you would not only need to play Undertale, but the Switch port of Undertale to understand this, but at the same time, personal and identity-related freedoms have never really been the focal point of these Shadow Crystal bosses. There's always been some existential freedom theme, with Spamton Neo trying to break free from the confines of the video game that he is stuck in, Gerson Boom refusing to listen to the prophecy, Jevil, you know, their whole backstory being about, like, I'm the only free person in the world, and all that. Like, the type of freedom that these bosses have gotten the motif over is very, very different to the type of freedom that Mad Mew Mew is representative of. And again, I have no issues with the fact that she does represent that kind of freedom. I think it's great, but I don't really think it's enough to give her the freedom motif. Her being the one to make the Purple Soul reappear also makes zero sense if you don't play Undertale Switch. In the Switch edition of Undertale, Mew Mew's secret fight contains an exclusive Soul mode, one split between blue and red to represent the two colors of the Switch's Joy-Cons. Why does that equate to Mew Mew bringing back the Purple Soul mechanic in Deltarune? Because red and blue make purple. How would you understand this without the outside information from Undertale? And again, one of the more obscure parts of Undertale, Mew Mew does not make an appearance in the PC release or even most of the console releases of Undertale. I'm pretty sure she's even a secret boss in the Switch version of Undertale. She's so fucking obscure to the point where it's absurd that you're expected to understand any of this as a casual player coming off the back of Undertale, because a majority of players probably did their playthrough on a console or PC, which doesn't even have Mad Mew Mew in it! Each of the other soul switches in Deltarune have been because the character in question is closely related to their Undertale Souls counterpart too. For example, Spamton Neo switches your soul mode to the yellow mode because he's literally possessing the Neo body that Metaton, whose soul mode is yellow, failed to use against you in the Undertale genocide route. Gerson turned your soul green because in Undertale, he was part of the same faction as Undyne is, whose soul mode is green. Jevil doesn't really have a soul switch, and neither does the Knight, because neither of them have a real Undertale counterpart. This makes sense, right? But Mew Mew has nothing to do with Muffet. The literal only reason that she has the purple soul mode is the ridiculously obscure reference to the fact that the blue and red soul mode, oh, those two colors combined make purple. It's funny, guys, it's funny! I don't understand why. I don't get why. Out of literally every Undertale character who could have been here, we got Mew Mew. It's not a case of Spamton or Gerson where we never did fight this character in Undertale, and it's not as if the rematch is justified like it would have been with Asgore. This makes little to no sense at all. Okay, this is a really small nitpick, but like, how does Orange even mistake Mew Mew for being pink, aka a secret other flower in the first place? It's a really, really tiny nitpick, but like, yeah, sure, I understand the connections between Mew Mew, the Soul, and Chris. I get what this battle is actually trying to say with the whole topic of the body and the mind being two separate enemies and needing to learn to get along, but could this not have been done with any other character? No, actually no. It has been done with another character. Spamton Neo! Spamton Neo is supposed to be the parallel between the Soul and Chris. This has been done before. This has literally been done before. This entire gimmick, this entire character gimmick has been done before. Why is it going again? Why? I also have a really big issue with the tone of this battle. Every other Shadow Boss has been played dead serious as being these rather impactful and earnest moments, whereas this is genuinely a joke battle where you defeat Mew Mew by flirting with her and entering a visual novel clip time event. What? Look, I guess that I enjoyed the reference to Spamton Neo with the strings coming from Mew Mew's hands near the end of the battle. Look, anything to see my goat again, but why do they appear here? Like, okay, my understanding of the green strings, which is seemingly backed up by their reappearance here, is that every Darkner is bound by strings just like Spamton Neo's. They're the metaphysical bindings, they're invisible puppet strings. They are there because these characters are NPCs. They all have puppet strings because they are puppets to the game's story. Side characters to appear, have their funny little moment, and then be cast away. Spamton Neo's strings appeared because the power of the Neo body wasn't enough for him to break free of the strings, but he came so close that he could see them. He could see freedom. He was so close, and yet ultimately, so far. So then why do the strings appear when Mew Mew's body overloads and she has an identity crisis about dating or not dating the fun gang? What is happening? What is happening? What is happening? Okay, look, if I had to give any positives about this battle, Mew Mew's sprites are really, really adorable, as are the sound effects that she has to go alongside her. The fight was unironically pretty fun, and I did like how well it expanded upon the Purple Soul mode, as every other Soul mode has been, an expanded version of what we see in Undertale. Well, it was fun, aside from the bomb attack. That was legitimately impossible. And wait, what was the name of the song again? Okay, I'm doing this off memory. Was it Cutie Mew Mew Magic, I think? It's a good song. Like, it's not a bad song, I enjoyed it. But, like, the main reason that I hate this boss so heavily is because it's when I really first realized that this chapter was not all that it could have been. It's the first time that Deltarune has literally just let me down, when a choice has put me in a legitimately bad mood. I was iffy at best on the chapter before I encountered Mew Mew, but this genuinely left me so upset, and it's when I got really motivated to speak up and look further into the chapter without the rose-tinted glasses of new Deltarune. It must be good. This boss can probably be linked as a reason that this review exists in the first place. This is the final Shadow Crystal boss. This is the last crystal in Shawm's side quest. This is the final hurdle between us and what the Shadow Crystals are actually for. Something that we have been theorizing about since 2018, which, for those who aren't keeping track, was 8 years ago. And the final Shadow Crystal boss is a joke. I'm angry. I'm genuinely angry. The bait and switch thing doesn't even really apply here because it's part of Asgore's bait and switch, which I've already discussed is fucking terrible. She is the reason why that switch happens, because she randomly got Asgore's Shadow Crystal. But as previously stated and hammered in throughout this entire video, Asgore should have been this boss. There was no reason for him not to be, like how you could argue that Friend was a baseless assumption, or how the red flower has never been a thing, or how Flowey was gone from the start because Flowery appeared. You could make those arguments, but Asgore, you can't make that argument for, because everything points towards fighting Asgore. This is the punchline to a joke which shouldn't have been told. Asgore should have been this boss! Oh my god. And, look, one could argue that maybe she didn't take Asgore's Shadow Crystal, but then if that's the case, where is it? That means there's another Shadow Crystal that we literally just... number one, we're never gonna get. Number two, wasn't part of the side quest. And number three, is a complete loose end. We don't know where it is, we don't know if Asgore still has it, we don't know. We don't know. And if this black shard wasn't a Shadow Crystal, then what the fuck was it? I am genuinely angry at this decision, and I don't understand why it had to be this way. Mew would have been fun to see again, to rebattle. Have her be an optional boss, though not the Shadow Crystal boss. Maybe similar to how Eram is technically a quote-unquote secret boss, but isn't a Shadow Crystal one. Look, Mew is not unwelcome in Deltarune, far from it, but she should not have been a fucking Shadow Crystal boss. She doesn't fit in with the other four in any way, shape, or form. She doesn't fit into their themes in any way, shape, or form. It sabotages and causes most of my issues with Asgore's character in this chapter, which just so happen to be some of my largest issues with this chapter as a whole! One of my biggest points against Asgore was his villain arc feeling like it got heavily copped out and like it made no sense and went nowhere. It would make sense if it were building on his Shadow Crystal plotline, but it isn't. No. That plotline that so many people cared about and so many people wanted to see end in this way, which was literally built up to for the entire chapter, and we had no reason to believe that we were wrong the entire chapter or the previous chapter. Yeah, that plotline? Yeah, fuck you. It led to Mad Mew Mew. Whatever. Final thoughts, for real this time. I think everything still holds up here. Overall, my rating stays mostly the same, maybe even bumped down slightly to a straight 6 out of 10 with Mad Mew. Oh, forget it. I don't actually have any cool or creepy way to segue into talking about the weird route in the script, so I'm finally going to address the elephant in the room. A million billion weird route jingles, human, I remember your genocide. Stuff. Chapter 5's Weird Route. I have so many things to say about Chapter 5's Weird Route, and no, they are not negative. The Weird Route has been a guilty pleasure of mine for a while. It's absolutely insane. It's one of the most evil things that you can do in a video game that I know of. It's probably one of the most psychologically disturbing and traumatizing things in a video game, and yet, it's so morbidly cool. I don't know what that says about me, saying that, but that's how I feel towards it. It is such an interesting and welcome addition to Deltarune, especially with the theme of your choices not mattering. Here they are, clearly meaning something. Look, there is no better way that I could explain this part of the Weird Route than just showing it to you. Seriously, the scene that I am about to talk about is so well crafted. I would say it is one of Toby Fox's best, and I do in fact mean that with a capital B, best, pieces of writing to date. I have nothing more to say, nothing more to get you ready for. All I can do is show you what Toby Fox has done. No. What we have done.
Oh my god, 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 oh my god
I'm looping way back around to being positive here. Forget everything I said about the writing of Chapter 5 when we're talking about the weird route. This part of Chapter 5 is one of the best written and most disturbing things that I have ever seen in a piece of fiction. Chapter 2's weird route has always been incredibly creepy. Like, the whole thing reads and plays like something you would see in a creepypasta. It's something that feels deeply wrong. It's something that doesn't feel like you should be doing it. The eldritch horror inspirations and just how far we go during Chapter 4's weird route really upset me in the best way possible. The whole scene with the ring in Noelle's room, I thought held the spot that Chapter 5's route now holds. I thought that it was genuinely one of the sickest, most disturbing things in gaming. And that's great. That is what the route is supposed to be. It's meant to be disturbing. It's meant to be scary. It's meant to be depraved. To make you feel like a terrible human being for the things that you, the soul, you the player, yes, you, not Kara, not Gaster, you do to Noelle. You make her kill her friend. You drive her practically insane. You instill the fear of God into her. And then in this chapter, I mean it when I say that this is the first time I've ever seen something online and told myself, I'm not doing this. I will never do this myself in the game, because it's too evil. The genocide route in Undertale came extremely close to being too brutal for me to finish. Papyrus was really hard to kill, and I genuinely felt sick after killing Toriel. But I've done a genocide run. I was able to push through it, because there was an end goal. Because I was able to fight Sans and Undyne and get a different ending. But this? No. I'm not doing this. It's too far. It's too cruel. It sickens me. Watching this for the first time, I got a deep knot in my stomach. Like I was genuinely watching something that I wasn't supposed to. And I love that. I love that about this. This is amazing. This is everything that Deltarune's weird route should be. Sickening, disturbing, shocking, deeply wrong. I should be feeling this way. Staring at the horror of what we did. What we created. What we have done on the weird route, effectively, is mentally torture a high school girl into almost murdering a friend of hers before instilling the fear of God into her, and then driving her and one of her closest friends to a double suicide by drowning. Why? Why would we do this? Well, that's a question for you to answer. Why did you do this? Did you want something new from the game? Did you expect a different ending? Did you expect that this was going to drastically change anything? Did you somehow think this was going to make things better? Why did you do the weird route? That is the reason that it exists. Your motivation as the soul, your reason as the soul, as the player, to do this to Noelle, is the reason that it happened. So let me ask you, does that seem fair? Whatever you wanted, whatever you were hoping to gain from the weird route, was murdering 2 children, driving them to suicide, really worth it? Look, with this reading of the weird route that I hold, I seriously hope that we do not get a different ending. I acknowledge the fact that we have insert Chapter 7 Side B, and I firmly believe that Chapter 7 will be vastly different. Trust me, vastly, drastically different. The means to get there are totally different. But if the same thing happens, regardless of route, if the roaring begins, and the final tragedy unveils, if we, the player, the angel, the soul, are banished, then did it mean anything? Sure, maybe we did different things along the way, but in your mind, do the means outweigh the ends? Did any small differences, hell, did any big differences along the way actually make the same ending class as something different? Did any of this matter? Did our choices matter? That's how I honestly think that the weird route is going to end. I firmly believe that no matter what drastic differences are made along the way, there will still only be the same events that play out in the ending. That makes only one ending with a question mark in Deltarune's description make total sense. It's a question. Do you think that this counts as a different ending just because you killed 2 people? Maybe this is what this video has been building towards. I lied to you all. I do love something about Deltarune Chapter 5 in the same way that I love something about every other chapter in the game. For all of its faults, all of its flaws, for all of the baffling writing choices which make me rip at my skin, the weird route stands above it all. I truly believe that the Deltarune Chapter 5 ending scene, the drowning scene, is one of, if not the single best written scenes in either Undertale or Deltarune to date. It achieves what it sets out to achieve perfectly and goes above and beyond. I loved Chapter 1's visuals. I loved the writing of Chapter 2. I loved the characters in Chapter 3. And I loved just how exciting Chapter 4 was. Well, I loved Chapter 5's weird route. Figures, even in the worst of circumstances, among the worst mistakes, there will always be something to love, to really love, about a Toby Fox release, no matter what it is. This alone, honestly, bumps my rating up to a 7.5. There's your final rating for the chapter. Chapter 5 of Deltarune gets an overall rating of 7.5 from me, even despite everything that I just said. It's flawed. It is incredibly flawed, or as I said in the beginning of the video, deeply flawed. There's so many writing issues, so many little tiny things that make me upset, that disappointed me, that make me angry, but this alone will forever be the best part of this chapter. And I am glad that it exists. I'm glad that Chapter 5 exists, even if it could have been so much better. Thank you for watching.
When the light is running low and the shadows start to grow, and the places that you know seem like fantasy, there's a light inside your soul that's still shining in the cold, with the truth, the promise in our hearts. Don't forget, I'm with you in the dark.
Wait! Genuinely, the last thing. I promise this is the last thing. Some people theorize that Chris and Noelle survived the weird route, or that they, glitched into the code, or glitched into Chapter 7, or the other side of the lake is Undertale, or the night is a Chris and Noelle amalgamate after a time loop post-weird route. I don't know. These are all terrible theories. They're dead as fuck, and that's the end of the weird route. Goodbye!
And save us, and my God!